Let's talk about Shedeur Sanders. Okay.
Ooh.
Do we have to?
I know. Do we?
Well, should we?
It's bad.
Should we just do the whole thing like he did?
If we're going to be honest about it, holy shit, are you kidding me?
Content creator, good.
Sure.
Okay, if he's a content creator,
Sure.
Yeah.
it is good.
Yeah.
Okay, like that was a hilarious response. Once again, this is just like, this kind of goes back to the Anthony Richardson conversation that kind of happened a year ago. It's like when you're a quarterback, it's just a different animal. Like being a quarterback is just a different thing. Yeah. You're the CEO of a company. You're the face of a multi-billion-dollar operation. Like that's what a quarterback is. Me, punter, could get away with being a dumbass in certain things. Don't have the spotlight on me all the time. Shedeur, third-string quarterback, fifth-round pick, obviously has a massive spotlight on him because of who he is, the success he's had, how many people follow and like him, and also, the family he comes from is a very important piece of the entire puzzle because that particular family, the dad happens to be one of the greatest athletes to ever exist. Not just one of the greatest football players, just athletes of all time, motivators, businessmen, musicians, we'll even say.
Sure.
I mean, you name it, good at everything. So family is going to be followed. Him being a part of that, obviously going to be talked about. So him responding to Rex Ryan saying, I don't need to hear you talk. I don't need to hear your mouth. I don't need to hear you talk.
Don't skip a single second of this video. And if this story touches your heart, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let's begin. I'm not going to lie. The first time I saw that clip, I felt the temperature in the room change. A quarterback, a microphone, a dozen questions flying, and Shedeur Sanders says nothing. Mouth moving, hands talking, sound off. It was petty. It was playful. It was a message. And the second it hit my feed, I knew we weren't just watching a joke. We were watching a line being drawn in ink you can't scrub off. Think about what set this off. Shut your mouth. That's the demand. Be quiet. Fall in line. Do it the right way. And Shedeur's response is to turn silence into a spotlight. He gives you the performance with the sound stripped out, and somehow you hear him louder than ever. That's why it stings. That's why it spreads. Not because it's disrespectful, because it's precise. It flips the power dynamic. You can tell a player to be quiet. You can't control what silence means. And that's the part nobody wants to admit. The gesture worked. If he had fired off a spicy quote, it would have been a 6-hour headline. But a mime routine? Now we're arguing about identity, leadership, the role of swagger in the NFL. We're arguing about who is allowed to carry charisma and when. We tell quarterbacks, be the CEO, but what we actually mean is, be the kind of CEO we grew up with. Press suit, measured tone. Thank you, coach. Next question. Shedeur chose a different play. He turned the press conference into a mirror, and every old school take had to stare back at itself. The irony's thick enough to cut with a face mask. Focus on football, they say. Stop chasing attention. And yet the quietest he's ever been made him the loudest story of the week. No touchdown, no stat line, no QB1 announcement. Just a clip with no audio that dominated the conversation more than a box score ever could. That's not an accident. That's media literacy. That's understanding the modern game off the field as well as on it. You can hate it, you can love it, but you can't pretend it didn't work. And look, I'm speaking as a fan who's seen this cycle before. We punish young quarterbacks for having a pulse, then celebrate the ones who win because they refuse to turn it off. Swagger is a problem until it isn't. Until it's late in the fourth, the pocket collapses, and the only thing keeping your guy standing is the exact defiant energy you told him to bury back in August. We keep trying to draft talent and deny personality, like you can unscrew the lid and only pour out the traits that make scouts comfortable. So ask yourself, why did this tiny moment bend the timeline? Because it pressed on an old bruise. It reminded everyone that the NFL isn't just a league, it's a language. And Shedeur changed the dialect for 1 minute and 14 seconds. He said without saying, I heard you, I'm still me. That's why it burned hot. That's why it felt bigger than a meme. It wasn't about disrespect. It was about authorship. Who gets to write the story when you're QB3, when your last name is heavy, when the room wants, yes, sir, and you offer, watch this instead? Here's the uncomfortable truth. This might reveal more about the league than it does about Shedeur. The clip exposed a gap, between the way the NFL has always done things and the way the next generation refuses to disappear. And if you think this ends with a viral laugh and we move on, you're missing it. This is just the spark. Because now we have to talk about the weight that comes with that name, that position, that locker room seat, and how the spotlight follows, even when the depth chart says it shouldn't. You ever notice how some last names walk into a room before the person does? Sanders is one of them. And when that first name happens to be Shedeur, you're not just walking in, you're stepping into a spotlight that's already hot before you even touch the mic. The second you lace up your cleats, the expectations start talking louder than you do. That's the weight of being Prime's son. You don't just inherit the name, you inherit the noise. Shedeur didn't choose this spotlight. He was born under it. Cameras caught his first high school snap, headlines tracked every transfer, and the moment he took a college field, people weren't judging him as a freshman. They were judging him against a Hall of Famer, and not just any Hall of Famer. Deion Sanders, the man who redefined swagger, who turned cornerback play into theater, who built an empire on confidence and production. Now imagine carrying that legacy as a quarterback, a position that demands control, restraint, humility, everything your father built his career breaking. That's the paradox of Shedeur Sanders. 5th round pick, 3rd string quarterback. But his shadow stretches like a starter. He posts one clip and it breaks the internet. He mimes one answer and the media scrambles like he called an audible on the entire league. Most QB3s could walk through a grocery store and go unnoticed. Shedeur can't take a step without someone holding a phone. Every smirk becomes arrogance. Every quote becomes disrespect. Because the name Prime is stitched into his DNA, and with it comes every ounce of expectation, envy, and bias that follows fame. And let's be honest, this league still struggles with personality. They tell quarterbacks, be a leader. But what they really mean is, be predictable. Be the clipboard smile. Be the polished quote. Don't say too much. Don't move too loud. Because the NFL still worships the prototype. Brady's poise. Manning's calm. Breeze's polish. If you don't fit that image, if you walk in with swagger, if you talk with rhythm, if you wear jewelry or laugh too hard in a loss, they call it immaturity. They call it distraction. But Shedeur grew up in a world that celebrates expression. He's from the generation that is the brand. The cameras don't scare him. They're part of the game. And that's what makes this collision so fascinating. Old school control meets new school confidence. The league doesn't know whether to coach it out of him or capitalize on it. When you grow up as Deion's son, humility isn't silence, it's survival. He's been compared, critiqued, and doubted since middle school. Every throw, every stat, every viral clip gets filtered through a single question. Would Prime approve? But Shedeur isn't Deion 2.0. He's not trying to lock down receivers or wear a gold chain after every pick six. He's a quarterback, a commander. And that means he has to build leadership his own way, even when the world keeps telling him he's just playing his dad's greatest hits. The truth is, that name is both shield and spotlight. It opens doors, but it also burns when you're not ready. And Shedeur, he's learning to walk that line in real time, under a microscope that never blinks. The media can't decide if they want him humbled or crowned. Fans love the flair. Analysts call it dangerous. Scouts whisper about culture fit. It's exhausting, trying to live up to a name that already broke the mold before you even arrived. And maybe that's why this whole moment feels so charged. Because when Shedeur Sanders mimes silence, he's not just trolling a critic. He's reminding everyone watching that this name, this pressure, this identity, it's his to carry and his to define. But that spotlight doesn't turn off when practice ends. And inside every headline, there's a question no one wants to answer. How much of the backlash is really about football? And how much is about who's allowed to lead with swagger? You ever wonder how a third-string quarterback becomes the biggest headline in football? We've got MVPs lighting up scoreboards, undefeated teams chasing history, and somehow the NFL world's on fire over a mime routine. Think about that for a second. A kid who hasn't taken a single snap in a regular season game just hijacked the news cycle from half the league. That's not just wild, that's revealing. Because the noise around Shedeur Sanders isn't about stats or snaps. It's about control. It's about who's allowed to talk and who's supposed to stay quiet. Rex Ryan said it out loud. We don't need to hear from a third-string quarterback. Translation: know your place. Don't act like you matter yet. But here's my question. If you're a backup punter with a podcast or a mid-tier QB like Gardner Minshew dropping quotes with flair, you're fun. You're a personality. The second a young black quarterback carries himself with confidence, suddenly it's a distraction. Suddenly we're debating humility like it's a measurable on a draft chart. That's not football analysis. That's coded language hiding in plain sight. And it's frustrating, man, because the same swagger we celebrate in prime time, in Mahomes, in Joe Burrow's icy calm, somehow becomes arrogance when it comes from a fifth-round rookie trying to carve out his lane. This league claims it wants leaders, but what it really wants are acceptable ones. Ones who smile the right way, shake the right hands, say yes, sir, in every interview. The second someone colors outside those lines, we don't evaluate them as players. We put them on trial as personalities. That's what Shedeur's living through. Not a quarterback competition, a cultural one. And that's why Pat McAfee's defense hit different. Pat's been in locker rooms. He's been the player with personality in a world that didn't know how to handle it. He gets that fine line between being yourself and being misunderstood. When Pat said, if he's a content creator, it's good, it wasn't sarcasm. It was understanding. It was respect. Because Pat knows exactly what Shedeur did. He flipped criticism into currency. He turned shade into spotlight. That's the new game. Not played between sidelines, but on screens. And Pat's one of the few guys from the old guard who's not threatened by it. This is where things start to split. You've got the traditional football minds, the Rex Ryans, the coordinators, the GMs who still treat media as the enemy. Then you've got this new wave of players who grew up with cameras on since high school, who know attention isn't a distraction, it's leverage. To the old NFL, silence is respect. To the new NFL, silence is strategy. Shedeur didn't talk back. He let virality do it for him. And that's what burns the purists. Because they can't control it. They can't fine it. They can't bench it. You can pull a player off the field, but you can't unplug the internet. You can't stop millions of fans from sharing a clip that says more than a press conference ever could. Maybe that's what this really is. Not right versus wrong, not talent versus ego, but old school football versus the new media era it can't quite understand. And if that's the case, Shedeur's not fighting a critic. He's fighting a culture that hasn't realized the game's already changed. So here's the question nobody in the media room wants to admit they're asking. Where's the line? Where does confidence turn into controversy? When does personality become a problem? Because in today's NFL, every smirk, every clip, every quote lives forever. And you better believe every scout, every GM, every executive sees it. They catalog it. They whisper about it. Not serious. Too online. Distraction risk. It's all data points now. Not just your 40 time or your tape, but your timeline. That's the danger Shedeur Sanders is walking into. Not a linebacker coming off the edge, but a narrative waiting to be weaponized. One viral clip and suddenly your work ethic's in question. One moment of swagger and they start asking if you love the game. But let's be real. This isn't new. This league has always preached control. The difference now is that cameras never turn off. And if you don't shape your own story, someone else will. Yet here's the thing. Swagger isn't the enemy. We've seen this movie before. Travis Kelce built an empire on charisma. Tyreek Hill turned doubters into highlights. OBJ? He lived a decade as both a lightning rod and a superstar. These guys leaned into their identities. They weren't loved by every front office, but they were undeniable. They made football bigger, louder, cultural. And whether the old guard likes it or not, that sells. That connects. That inspires. So when Pat McAfee says, it only takes one team to want you, he's not joking. He's telling the truth. Some coaches look at swagger and see poison. Others see presence, leadership, juice. The difference is perspective. There are still front offices that want robots in helmets. But the new school ones? They want energy. They want players who bring fans with them, who turn pressers into moments, who can walk into a locker room and make it feel alive. That's not ego. That's resonance. And that's where Ken Dorsey's perspective hits hard. He's been around this league for 30 years. He's coached every type of quarterback. The polished ones, the wild cards, the grinders, and even he admits it. Locker room harmony matters more than headlines. You can survive noise on Twitter. You can't survive division in your own huddle. If the quarterback room's solid, if the O-line respects you, if the team believes in your grind, the outside noise doesn't matter. What breaks a team isn't content, it's fracture. But here's the twist. The league itself is changing faster than its rulebook. Content is currency now. Attention is leverage. A rookie's brand can bring millions of eyes to a franchise before he throws a single pass. And Shedeur, he's not just part of that shift, he's embodying it. Whether it's instinct or strategy, he's playing the modern game better than most. You don't have to like it. You just have to recognize it. Because the NFL isn't just about football anymore. It's about footprint. And if swagger gets you seen and silence gets you trending, maybe Shedeur isn't crossing the line. Maybe he's redrawing it. But that raises an even bigger question. What happens when authenticity becomes a gamble? At the end of the day, that's what this all comes down to. A gamble. Not a stat line, not a throw chart, not a playbook. A gamble on authenticity in a league built on conformity. Because make no mistake, Shedeur Sanders knows exactly what he's doing. He's betting that being unapologetically himself, the same kid who grew up in his father's shadow and still walked out with his own swagger, will pay off in a system that's terrified of players it can't predict. That's a risky bet, because if he fails, every critic gets to say, "I told you so." They'll point to the clips, the memes, the pressers, and call it arrogance. They'll say, "He should have focused on football." They'll pretend they never enjoyed the ride. But if he succeeds, if Shedeur Sanders finds a way to rise his way, not the league's way, then every young athlete watching will realize they don't have to shrink themselves to fit someone else's standard. That's bigger than football. That's generational. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. Because while Shedeur's out here commanding attention with silence, Dillon Gabriel's writing a completely different script. He's the quiet grinder, the first in, last out. The guy who didn't need cameras to prove consistency, and now he's earned his shot. He's QB1, the steady hand, the unshakable pro. You look at Dillon and you see discipline. You look at Shedeur and you see defiance. And maybe, just maybe, both are right. Because not everyone leads the same way. Not everyone wins the same way. The league needs both, the worker and the wave maker, the humble and the headline. The truth is, every generation of football players gets tested, not just on Sundays, but on identity, who they are, how much of themselves they're willing to risk. For Shedeur, that risk is public. Every move analyzed, every word replayed. But here's the part his critics always miss. None of this is aimless. His silence wasn't a tantrum, it was control. A moment of creative defiance that said, "You can't write my story for me." Maybe swagger isn't arrogance. Maybe it's belief. Maybe confidence that loud is the only way to survive when the world keeps telling you to shut up and earn it. We're watching a new kind of player emerge, one that doesn't separate brand from ball, one that knows the camera is just another field. And yeah, that makes people uncomfortable. But the truth is, in today's NFL, personality is power. You can't teach it. You can't fake it. And if you're bold enough to use it, it can either build your legacy or burn your chance. That's the gamble. So here we are. One player talking with throws, another talking without words. Two paths, one truth. The game's changing, and we're all watching in real time. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't just trying to play in the NFL. He's trying to redefine what it means to be seen in it. And whether you love him or can't stand him, you can't look away. And that, right there, might be the real power he's holding.